Could a small West African nation rise to the top while the mighty West crumbles into irrelevance? Is it possible that the West, with all its wealth and power, is secretly terrified of what's happening in Burkina Faso right now? It looks like a single African nation holds the blueprint for Africa's entire future, while Europe and America are running out of time. Burkina Faso is making achievements no one thought possible, and now it's making a new city. The details will shock you. But are they making it without Western aid? Let's find out. Under the resolute leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is not merely planning a city, it is signaling the end of Western dominance and the rise of African sovereignty. The Renaissance city is more than just bricks and mortar. It is a revolution, a giant middle finger to the West, a declaration that Africa doesn't need foreign aid, approval, or influence. Africa will build its future, and the West can do nothing to stop it.
No one can blame Africans for assuming that the rest of the world has very little interest in their continent, except maybe for extracting natural resources like gold and oil, or buying weapons and counterterrorism. Former U.S. President George W. Bush famously referred to it as a nation instead of a continent with 54 very diverse countries, each with its own unique interests and history. President Trump had awful things to say about Africa.
For too long, the West has profited from Africa's resources, labor, and ingenuity, all while spreading false narratives of saving the continent. But those days are numbered. As the Renaissance City project takes shape in Burkina Faso, it stands as a beacon of African ambition and defiance. The message is clear. Africa will no longer be chained by neo-colonialism. While the West falters under the weight of its greed and hypocrisy, Africa is poised to take its rightful place at the helm of global power. But before you understand how important this city will be, you need to know how hard it was to make the Western dominance fall in Africa. The West, for centuries, has built its wealth by leeching off the riches of Africa. Colonialism, followed by neo-colonialism, has been the modus operandi through which they've maintained control over the global South, particularly Africa. But the world is changing, and the Western Empire is crumbling from within. Political instability is rampant in Europe and the United States, with corrupt leaders, divisive politics, and economic crises becoming the norm. Societies that once held themselves as the pinnacle of civilization are unraveling in real time. Brexit, for example, has left the United Kingdom weaker than ever, and the political circus in the United States has exposed deep-rooted systemic problems. In contrast, Africa is waking up, shedding the remnants of colonial shackles. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso are at the forefront of this awakening, driving their nations toward true independence. The Renaissance City project is more than just an ambitious housing plan. It's a declaration that Africa will not be held back by the dying powers of the West. As the West's house of cards continues to collapse, Burkina Faso is constructing the foundation for Africa's future, a future free from Western exploitation. The truth is glaring. The West's reliance on centuries-old exploitation models is no longer sustainable. The era of taking from Africa without consequence is over. The West is now grappling with its issues: failing economies, rampant social injustice, and a crumbling political framework. In their desperation to maintain control, Western powers attempt to destabilize rising African nations with economic manipulation and political interference. But the tide is turning, and Africa is pushing back harder than ever before. But how come the progress of Africa means the fall of the West in Africa? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Was this not West's intention? They always said they want to make Africa better. So if Africa is becoming better, how is it affecting the West badly? While the West is caught in a downward spiral of economic decline, political chaos, and social unrest, Africa is rising, not with handouts, but with vision and determination. The Renaissance City project stands as an example of Africa's renewed strength. It is more than just homes or infrastructure. It is a symbol of defiance against the West's long-held belief that Africa cannot thrive without its interference. Africa is building its future with its own hands, its capital, and its strategies. And Burkina Faso is leading the charge. The 50,000 homes that Traoré has promised are just the beginning of a much larger movement sweeping across the continent. The days of Africa begging at the table of global powers for scraps are over. We are witnessing the dawn of a new era where African nations are taking their destinies into their own hands. Compare this to the West, where once mighty economies now teeter on the brink of collapse. The United States, for example, is grappling with unprecedented levels of national debt, inflation, and an increasingly fragile political system that is losing legitimacy by the day. Europe, with its deeply fractured union, has no answer to the economic and political crises it faces. Meanwhile, African nations, led by visionaries like Traoré, are laying down the blueprint for a future where Africa doesn't just survive, it thrives. The Renaissance City project, in particular, is a game changer. By rejecting the outdated Western playbook of dependence and exploitation, Traoré is demonstrating that Burkina Faso, and indeed Africa, can build its future. The West is crumbling under the weight of its greed, while Africa is rising from the ashes of colonial oppression. It's important to remember that the West has long used housing and infrastructure development as tools for control. For decades, African nations were lured into so-called development projects funded by foreign investors and global financial institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These projects were nothing more than debt traps, designed to keep African nations beholden to Western interests. But Traoré's vision for Burkina Faso breaks this cycle. The 50,000 homes planned for Renaissance City are not simply a cosmetic solution to the housing crisis. They are a foundation for genuine economic empowerment. These homes are being built with local labor, using locally sourced materials, and funded by African capital. This is how Africa wins, not by depending on Western money or falling into the same debt traps that have crippled so many nations, but by taking full control of its development. What makes the Renaissance City even more revolutionary is that it isn't just about housing. It's about reclaiming sovereignty. It's about showing the world that Africa can and will build its cities without relying on foreign aid or loans that come with strings attached. This is Africa proving that it can stand tall on its own, and the West cannot stand it. The housing projects of the past, funded by foreign aid or through international development agencies, have often resulted in more problems than solutions. For every house built, there's usually a hidden agenda. Often they come with conditions that strip nations of their sovereignty, placing them under the influence of foreign investors or global institutions. And who benefits? The elites in the West, while African nations are left with mountains of debt and very little in return. The Renaissance City, on the other hand, is Africa taking its power back. This project is a break from the old playbook. It isn't about appeasing foreign investors or winning approval from Western powers. Instead, it's about Burkina Faso asserting itself as a leader in a new Africa. It's about homes built by Africans, for Africans. It's about ensuring that the wealth generated from these projects stays in Africa and is used to uplift its people. Now the question is, how will the West cope with this?
The perceptions of Africa and the US are very much outdated, and I would say that they are stuck in the 20th century for the most part. You find this across various levels of American society. So overall, Africa is seen as a humanitarian case racked by conflict, by corruption, by terrorism, and in need of aid.
As Burkina Faso surges ahead with its Renaissance City project, the Western media will downplay its significance. They will label it as just another African development scheme, all while hoping for it to fail. After all, nothing scares the West more than the sight of a self-sufficient Africa that no longer needs them. But the reality is that the West's power is fading fast. Their control over the global economy is weakening, and their influence over African nations is slipping through their fingers like sand. The West is built on an illusion of power, an illusion that is rapidly unraveling. For years, they have relied on their control of global financial systems, their military might, and their ability to manipulate international relations to maintain their grip on power. But as Africa rises, that illusion is fading. The Renaissance City is proof that Africa no longer needs to bow to the whims of Western nations. Burkina Faso's success will inspire other African nations to follow suit, breaking free from the chains of foreign control. As Western economies buckle under the pressure of their excesses, African nations like Burkina Faso are positioning themselves for a brighter future. The West's dominance is unsustainable, and they know it. But they are powerless to stop Africa's rise. Traoré's Renaissance City is just the beginning. It represents a future where African nations are the ones calling the shots on the global stage. It's no surprise that the West would want to minimize this success. For centuries, their grip on Africa has been tight. They've controlled the narrative, they've controlled the resources, and they've controlled the people. But that grip is loosening. The Renaissance City is more than just a housing project. It's a signal to the world that Africa is ready to take its place at the table. And this time, it won't be as a guest. Africa is here to lead. The Western media's attempts to downplay the significance of projects like the Renaissance City won't change the truth. The West is in decline, and Africa is rising. As the Renaissance City continues to take shape, it will serve as a beacon to other African nations, inspiring them to follow Burkina Faso's lead and build their futures without relying on the West. While the lies will continue, let's find out how this new project impacts economically. The economic significance of the Renaissance City cannot be overstated. This project is not just about housing. It's about creating jobs, fostering innovation, and building a sustainable economy that benefits the people of Burkina Faso, not foreign corporations. Traoré's vision for the Renaissance City is rooted in African self-reliance. The project is funded by African money, built by African labor, and will serve African people. It's a model for economic independence that terrifies the West. For too long, African nations have been at the mercy of Western financial institutions that loan money with impossible terms, effectively holding entire countries hostage. These institutions, including the IMF and World Bank, have been nothing more than tools of economic imperialism. But Traoré is rejecting this model outright. He understands that true economic growth comes from within, not from loans or foreign aid that come with conditions designed to keep Africa in a state of perpetual dependency. The Renaissance City project is the embodiment of this new economic paradigm. By focusing on local resources and local labor, Burkina Faso is ensuring that the benefits of this massive development stay within its borders. This is a stark contrast to the Western model of development, where foreign companies swoop in, take all the profits, and leave nothing behind but debt and dependency. The West can't compete with this model because it goes against everything they stand for. Their entire system is built on exploitation, taking from others to fuel their growth. But as Africa builds its future, that system will crumble. The Renaissance City is a blueprint for economic liberation, and it's only a matter of time before other African nations follow Burkina Faso's lead. The economies of Western nations are falling apart at the seams. Debt levels are skyrocketing, unemployment rates are rising, and their once dominant industries are crumbling. The West's reliance on exploitation has left them vulnerable, and now they are paying the price. Africa, on the other hand, is investing in its future. It is building infrastructure that will not only provide immediate benefits, but will also lay the foundation for long-term economic growth. The Renaissance City is just the first step in a much larger plan to ensure that Africa's wealth stays in Africa. We all know how the West tries to find problems in everything Africa does, so before they ask, let's see if this city is sustainable. The West loves to preach about sustainability and green development, but their actions betray their true intentions. While they lecture Africa on the need to go green, they continue to exploit the continent's resources with no regard for the environment or the people living there. They push their eco-friendly narratives as a way to maintain control over African nations, all while reaping the benefits of Africa's natural wealth. But Traoré isn't falling for this hypocrisy. The Renaissance City is being built with sustainability at its core, not because of Western pressure, but because it's the right thing to do for the people of Burkina Faso. Traoré understands that true sustainability isn't about appeasing the West. It's about protecting the land and resources that belong to the African people. As part of the Renaissance City project, Traoré is implementing eco-friendly building practices, reforestation efforts, and renewable energy sources. This isn't just lip service. This is real, tangible progress toward a sustainable future for Burkina Faso. And it's happening without the need for Western interference. It's happening despite the West's attempts to keep Africa dependent on its outdated energy systems and exploitative practices. The West's version of sustainability is nothing more than a facade. They lecture Africa on the need for environmental responsibility while continuing to plunder the continent's resources for their gain. But Africa is no longer playing by the West's rules. Traoré's Renaissance City is proof that Africa can, and will, lead the way in sustainable development on its terms. And what future holds for Africa? The Renaissance City is a beacon of hope for Africa, a symbol of what the continent can achieve when it takes control of its destiny. The West, meanwhile, is crumbling under the weight of its greed and arrogance. Their time is up. Africa is rising, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. This isn't just about Burkina Faso, it's about a continent-wide awakening. The Renaissance City is the first step in a larger movement that will see African nations reclaim their sovereignty, their resources, and their futures. The days of Africa being a pawn in the West's game are over. We are entering a new era where African nations will be the ones setting the global agenda. As the West continues its decline, Africa will rise to take its place on the global stage. Traoré's Renaissance City is just the beginning. It represents a future where African nations are not only self-sufficient, but are leaders in innovation, sustainability, and economic growth. The West may have had its time in the sun, but that era is over. The future belongs to Africa, and we know Burkina Faso's path to development, spearheaded by initiatives like the Renaissance City Project, reflects a broader Pan-African push towards self-sufficiency, sovereignty, and economic growth. But how long will it take for Burkina Faso to fully realize this vision of development? This question depends on several key factors, including economic growth rates, investment in infrastructure, political stability, and the nation's ability to resist external pressures. Currently, Burkina Faso is growing economically, though at a slower pace compared to some other African nations. The country has an annual GDP growth rate that has ranged between 4% and 6% in recent years. If this rate continues and accelerates through infrastructure projects like the Renaissance City, combined with strategic investments in agriculture, education, and industry, Burkina Faso could see dramatic improvements in the next few decades. However, complete development would depend on how quickly the nation can overcome challenges such as poverty, unemployment, and reliance on foreign aid. A realistic projection could see Burkina Faso reaching a level of significant self-sufficiency within the next 30 to 50 years, provided that its growth trajectory remains steady and that leadership, like President Traoré's, continues to focus on independent economic policies and sustainable development. By this point, Burkina Faso could become a key player in the African economic landscape, with thriving industries, an empowered population, and reduced dependency on foreign powers. In comparison to Western nations that took centuries to develop, Africa's rise, especially for countries like Burkina Faso, could happen much faster, driven by modern technology, innovation, and the rejection of exploitative foreign influence. The Renaissance City is a bold start, but the broader movement toward full development will require unwavering dedication to building industries, improving education, and fostering innovation from within. The West has had its time of exploiting the world, but that time is coming to an end. The Renaissance City in Burkina Faso is proof that Africa doesn't need the West's approval or aid. Africa is fully capable of building its future, one that is prosperous, independent, and sustainable. The West, plagued by internal chaos, crumbling economies, and failed leadership, is no match for the rising tide of African sovereignty. Do you think the future belongs to Africa? What will happen if the progress continues? Where do you see Burkina Faso in a few years? Let us know in the comment section. Will the West try to stop Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.